Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom with our host, Bob Olson, who will now introduce today's show and speaker.
WCAT Radio presents I Thought You'd Like to Know This Too, which is our Friday edition of I Thought You'd Like to Know This, interviewing many interesting people who have a message for you. And our guest tonight has been on before, T.J. Burdick, who wrote a book that we talked about, 99 Ways to Teach Like the Master. And he is a Catholic by grace, a husband and father by vocation, and teaches by God's calling. He attained his master's in the art of teaching in 2014. He writes and speaks to help promote Catholic education for the home school, for the public and private school sectors on every grade level. You can find more of his work at tjburdick.com. So welcome, T.J. Burdick.
Hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
One of my favorite towns in Michigan, in Grand Rapids. I broadcast sports there, and of course I did quite a bit of ministry there too, so I know a lot about
wonderful.
Grand Rapids.
Yeah, Grand Rapids is a great place to be. All of western Michigan is just beautiful, especially in the winter. I love it. It's a little bit long, but now that we're kind of exiting out of the winter, I'm looking forward to a nice summer as well along the lake.
Have you had any snow lately?
Not too much. We've had just a few inches here and there every once in a while. We haven't had a very big snow winter, to say the least. It's been a cold one, but it hasn't been, we haven't gotten dumped on a whole lot.
All right. Well, let's get right into it. You have a new course. You say in your intro video, Teach Like Jesus is the new course, that teaching is everyone's vocation. How can we all learn from Jesus' teaching skills?
Well, Jesus was the master teacher, and so, bar none, the best teacher that's ever existed. And, for me, as I was going through my own teacher preparation coursework, I was, always anxious to get into the classroom and actually experience it. And, every teacher will tell you that no matter how much you prepare or how much schooling you have, you're really not prepared to teach until you actually get in the classroom. And so, and usually after that, it takes about 5 or 6 years to really become pretty good at it. And so, as I was going through my own teacher prep, and after I graduated, my first few years of teaching, I came to the realization that all the professional development that I was listening to, and everything that I was signed up for, and all the degrees that I'd earned, all the good lessons that I heard about effective teaching were practiced by Jesus over 2,000 years ago. And so for me, it was just, an awakening to say, what, why don't we, if we really want to learn how to be an effective teacher, let's study the actual master instead of, just the contemporary masters that we've been studying throughout our whole teaching career. And so I decided to create a course on the things that I noticed in Jesus' teaching throughout the Gospels, so that other teachers could benefit from that and bring Jesus into the classroom without ever having to really mention his name, but more or less being able to put his own practices into practice in their own classrooms.
Now, what's been your success in bringing this into, like you say, the public schools and private schools?
Yes, yeah, that's correct. See, I actually work in the public sector right now. I've worked all over the world, both nationally in the United States and internationally in Mexico. I've worked in private schools. I've worked in public schools. I've homeschooled my own children. Education for me is always been kind of an addiction of sorts, but more or less a vocation because, as you mentioned before, everyone's called to be a teacher. And so as a father, you're called to be a teacher. As a coach, you're called to be a teacher. And for me, as a teacher, I found that, the directness of Jesus' teaching instruction, his pedagogy, his classroom management, his educational philosophy, it's all right there in the gospel. And so there had to have been a whole bunch of crossover. And so what I did was I took my public school job where I'm at right now, and I said, all right, how am I going to be able to live like Jesus as teacher here and now, without necessarily fearing, without ever having the fear of being fired for, proclaiming the gospel in front of my kids and doing it, directly like that.
Yeah,
for me, it's always an indirect thing, and it's something that comes from within. And when you teach through the Holy Spirit, you do it through your soul, which Jesus communicates his messages to your own students, even in the public school, through your persona, through your delivery, and more or less through your experience.
That's interesting. Now, what is the? You're a lay Dominican, so a part of being a teacher, you are also a preacher. Is there an order of preachers? How does preaching tie into good teaching?
Well, the two are very subtle. I like to compare it to the Mass. The two different parts of the Mass, we have the liturgy of the Word and the liturgy of the Eucharist. And I like to think a lot of the preaching portion is that foundational piece when it comes to the liturgy of the Word. We're preparing ourselves for the real experience of learning. And in the Mass, we do that through the liturgy of the Word. We read the Gospel, we listen to the Psalms, we have the first or second reading. And as we're developing this understanding, we're building a foundation. And we wouldn't be able to have this foundation unless somebody was willing to preach it to us. Hence, the priest, the deacon, or the bishop who stands and delivers and interprets the meanings of the Scriptures for us so that we can then be strengthened in the Word. And so there's one side. You have to have a solid foundation of study, of understanding to be a good teacher. You have to plan your lessons. You have to know your subject material in order to be able to teach it successfully. That's how I compare it to the Mass and the liturgy of the Word. Now, the liturgy of the Eucharist is what the liturgy of the Word was meant to kind of segue into. The liturgy of the Eucharist is the actual experience. It's the full-on learning. It's the seeing Jesus right there in front of you and being able to take him into your body and soul. And so when you're actually teaching, there's a moment when, you've prepared for weeks to be able to create this one awesome lesson. And then there's that moment when it just clicks, and the kids are like, oh, yeah, I totally didn't even understand that. Now I do. I like to compare that a lot to the Eucharist because a lot of the time when we are celebrating Mass, we might not be able to feel it spiritually all the time, but there are some lessons and some days when you receive the Eucharist and you're like, oh, man, that's right, that's it. And there's that experiential Jesus, that Christ dying on the cross to save our sins, that, he's right there, and he's right there allowing us to learn from him, to follow him. And that's what we do as teachers. We are more than just, lesson plan developers and curriculum developers. We're witnesses. We're the ones that are able to divulge all this information and truth within our subject matter. And we do that every day as a teacher. And so as a preacher, as a lay Dominican, I have this responsibility of going back to study my faith. And at the same time, I have to proclaim it. St. Thomas Aquinas is famously quoted saying, you're supposed to contemplate and then share the fruits of your contemplation. As a teacher, that's exactly what we do. We contemplate the subject that we love so much, and yet we want the students to love it that much too. And so we're motivated by our own personalities, by our own experiences to share exactly what the truth is behind those subject matter, which is ultimately a sharing in Christ's life, which is comparative to, as you would say, the liturgy of the Eucharist.
I worked with a priest in Cincinnati, Father L. Lauer. He died a few years ago. And he had a habit of writing all his homilies sitting before the tabernacle. And all of his teaching, all of the pamphlets and books that he wrote and so forth, he did all of that sitting in front of the tabernacle. And it was really amazing how he did that.
Well, Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen used to do the same thing. He had the same practice. He had his own private chapel in his house or apartment, wherever he was in New York, in Rochester, and every day he'd spend an hour in front of the Blessed Sacrament exposed, and yet he'd probably stay there for 2, 3, 4 times. All of the books that he wrote were composed, right in front of Jesus, and I tried to imitate that too. It's kind of hard nowadays, with the new technology and everything too, because it's strange because you don't want to take out your laptop and start typing with right in front of Jesus. It seems kind of strange, but it kind of brings it back.
With one of these legal pads.
Mm-hmm.
So, like you say, it's not the same today. But there's a lot of power there, huh?
Yes, very much so. And it's always a difficult task, but it's nice to go back and get a pen and pad of paper, too, because there's a lot of synapses that kind of click in your brain in a very different way when you're writing by hand than if you were writing by a computer. And I think that's the way God meant it to be.
Really? Now, this Dominican Institute, what's the goal of this institute?
Well, the Dominican Institute is how do I explain it? When I was going through my reversion and I came to a point where I realized that my own personal study was good, but I felt like I needed a push in a more academic direction, but I knew that I needed somebody to guide me towards it. And where I was at that point, I didn't know a whole lot of people that could really push me further in my faith, besides my priest, who was extremely busy. So I didn't want to have to burden him with my own personal study or recommendations for books and things like that. And so I was, at that point, Dr. Sebastian Mahfoud from Holy Apostles College and Seminary, he got in contact with me via Sean McAfee, a friend of mine who is the owner of Epic Pew. He writes at the NC Register as well. Anyway, those two guys got me hooked into Holy Apostles College and Seminary, and the recent graduates that had just graduated prior to me meeting them. And so I had this, how do you explain it? I had this community, a really small community of like-minded folks who were well above me when it came to theology and philosophy. I was just a beginner. I still consider myself a beginner, especially in their shadow. And anyway, as I was, moving on and learning through at Holy Apostles and, asking them questions and having them field them for me, I realized that a lot of these guys that I was now hanging out with online who were, brilliant, absolutely brilliant men, I found that they were, barely surviving for the most part in low-paying Catholic school, high school teaching jobs, or maybe they were stay-at-home dads and that was their vocation. But I just couldn't comprehend the fact that these men were doing so much for the church, and yet they were they weren't very recognized for it. And so what I decided to do was I went back into the times, where before I knew these people, and I really wanted to learn more about the faith. I just didn't know how to. And so we decided to create what's called the Dominican Institute, in which we offer courses based on the very things that I wanted to study when I was going through that reversion, the Bible, or maybe moral theology, or introduction to philosophy, or Thomism. All these things that were on my mind that I really couldn't comprehend. We wanted to get them out to more people who were probably a lot like me, who might not be able to afford tuition at a university and take the university-level coursework, or who don't necessarily have a best friend who has their master's in theology, or who might not be able to trust the orthodoxy of some of the universities that are out there right now. And so we created this Dominican Institute, and we offer courses, as I mentioned before, for people who are just like me, people who seek truth, but might not have the time or might not have the money to be able to purchase it. We offer the courses that are very similar to graduate and undergraduate level courses, taught by professors who have their masters in that particular discipline. And we charge about 10% of what a university would cost. And for the majority, a lot of the courses have unlimited seating because most of them are automated. And yet we also have professor-led instruction as well for anywhere from 6-week courses to 15-week semester-long courses. And this is exactly the thing that I would have wanted when I was going through my reversion, to be able to really grasp the truth and get into it as much as I really wanted to. We've experienced a lot of success with our current students.
Wow. So when did you start this?
Well, it was a seedling, probably in about, let's see here, we're in 2017 now, so it was towards the end of 2015, prior to, Christmas 2015. That's when we started kind of dialoguing about the possibility of it. We did a beta launch, I think, in February of last year, and so we've been around for officially about a year now, and we're still pretty unknown at the moment, mainly because our budget's been pretty low because it's a startup. And so that being said, we're still making a lot of gains within our small circles of communication. But like I said, doing shows like these is a good way to kind of get exposure, but at the same time, we want people to build up our trust. And so we've been taking it very slow, being very intentional about every move that we make when it comes to our course curriculum, our instructors that we are seeking to be able to teach these courses, and being able to give as much as we can to the students that we have right now. They might be a small population, but we want them to know that we care for them. And so we keep the population kind of low at this point so that we can build a little bit higher as the future goes on.
Well, you just never know. I've been recycling a radio program that Father Al Lauer in Cincinnati started quite a few years ago, and he died in '02, and he asked me to continue recycling the program. And we had about 25 radio stations across the country. But then there's a very popular Catholic app. It's called Laudate. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I'm familiar with it, yes.
You're familiar, okay. Well, just right out of the blue, they heard the program apparently, and we hadn't had any contact with them or anything. And just out of the blue, they picked up the program, and we immediately picked up 40,000 listeners a day.
Wow, that's amazing. That's pretty quick growth.
So you see how God can use this internet. It's just amazing.
Yeah, I agree. It's the great connector. I like to think that Archbishop Sheen had his hand in that when it came to the development of the internet after he passed away. I like to think that it was him that did have a lot of what's the word I'm looking for, inspiration for the people working in technology at that point.
Well, you just never know what's going to happen. You put it out there, and wow, things can happen. Yes. God willing. What types of courses now do you offer at the Dominican Institute?
Well, apart from the course that I offer at Teach Like Jesus, we're also offering several others. A moral theology course is on its way. We also are offering a lot of philosophy at this point because we want the student to be able to be grounded in a good philosophical foundation. So we have Intro to Philosophy, we have Logic, a few others as well. On top of that, we have a Introduction to Scripture. That one just came out last semester. We also have one of our latest courses. It's a 6-week course on the Second Vatican Council, and what else have we got going on? We have so many courses going on. It's hard for me to keep track. Let's see here. I'm trying to think off the top of my head.
Now, do you have help in this endeavor?
Yes, my fellow professors and I were the ones that kind of put it all together. I have a tech guy who helps me out with most of the tech stuff, but the professors are the ones that make it live. One of our top professors right now, Dr. Doug Beaumont, he just signed on for a apologetics course. He published the book recently, Evangelical Exodus, Evangelical Seminaries and Their Path to Rome. It's put out by Ignatius Press last year. It's basically his road toward Rome, along with a lot of his fellow students and other fellow teachers as well. It's a very good piece, but he's a top-notch apologist, and I mean to be able to take a course with him is just already stunning. The fact that it's possible, but he's definitely one of our top professors over there. So,
but you're the key person in the organization of it, huh?
Yeah, correct. I'm the founder, and I help run the ship. So, but my professors are the ones that put the oars into the waves.
Mm-hmm. Now, your newest course, St. Thomas Aquinas, Meditations for Lent, is being offered for free. What can you tell us about this class?
Well, this is one of my favorite courses thus far because, for me and for many people, Aquinas can be very intimidating. Reading his Summa, it's 3.5 million words, give or take a couple. And so just the girth of it's already enough to be able to say, okay, I'm out. But to be able to understand, the deep philosophical thought behind everything that he wrote in that is also very difficult to understand. Now, he also has this rather unknown work called Meditations for Lent. And it's not as meaty as the Summa by any means. It's more of a practical, short little meditations for every day. In fact, you'll probably end up reading for about 5 minutes and probably contemplating the whole day. So you'll spend more time contemplating than actually reading the text for each day because it's so spiritually charged and so direct and so uniquely Aquinas, but at the same time it's a lot less academic and more practical in its matter. And so this course has been great because we also have a it's a private Facebook group for all the members as well. Currently, we have I think over 400 people in the course itself, with about 100 of them participating in the daily conversations as well on Facebook. And so it's interconnected in that we're all praying together, and in the moment that we have questions or insights, we share with each other through Facebook to be able to kind of get a deeper grasp on Aquinas' meaning through his meditations throughout all of Lent.
That's what you were referring to, I think, when you mentioned you might be talking about meditation.
Yeah, exactly. When you think about meditations, that Aquinas is his main quote that I mentioned earlier, being able to contemplate and share the fruits of your contemplation. Well, you can't contemplate without meditation, and this is like I know you're not supposed to be able to eat meat during Fridays and that, but when you read Aquinas, it's just like eating meat. You're not taking the milk of your theology. It's not like it's not as gung ho as the Summa, but at the same time, it's not as it's not as easy as like a daily reflection that most people would be reading during Lent. So it's kind of like a good gateway for people who need that little bit of extra challenge in their faith and have already grasped a lot of the basics of Catholic theological understanding. This course kind of brings the two together. This high academic behemoth of Aquinas comes down to earth really to kind of meet the layman, the person who really wants to learn their faith on a higher level.
Mm-hmm. We're making it seem like it can help Catholics, even the little kids, huh?
Well, that's actually a different program that we've created through the Dominican Institute called Tiny Thomists. We're trying to be able to through the Dominican Institute, we want to be able to offer something for every age group, and we have the graduate and undergraduate course level work, but we also want to be able to meet the families where they're at. I have a young family right now. My wife and I have 4 kids, ages 6 and under, and so we're very busy, and it's hard for us to kind of, institute or be able to teach our kids our faith in the way that we'd want to. And so what I did was I ended up being very intentional about it and created this program called Tiny Thomists. And Tiny Thomists is basically every 2 weeks I send a lesson plan out to all the subscribers. And this lesson plan will take you, 2 weeks to be able to teach your kids very intentionally, the truths that come from not only the Summa Theologica, which I bring down to a child's level, but also the virtues of the saints, or a saintly situation in which kids find themselves in to be able to live more virtuously, or many other activities that you can do, games or things that you can do with your kids, to be able to, enliven their faith and teach them very purposefully the truths of the Catholic Church. And we offer this for free, and it's been taken off so quickly. I mean, in the last we launched it 7 weeks, and I think we have 500 families, over 500 families right now that are subscribed. And I just feel so great that what I'm teaching my own children here at home might be useful somewhere else at someone else's. It's basically it can replace a homeschool religion curriculum. It can produce more ideas. It can help with every catechist who teaches pre-First Communion. And the best part about it is that it fits with the busy schedule of the typical United States large young family. We're running from ballet classes to swimming lessons, and how are we going to be able to fit in our faith during this time? Well, Tiny Thomas, it's the answer to all your prayers, and it really helps the kids understand what's going on not only at Mass, but what's going on with their faith at such a young age. And just speaking of my own family, it's so nice to see them memorizing parts of the Summa in early first grade. It's really quite astonishing.
Well, starting those habits early is so important.
Yeah.
It just becomes a part of you then.
Yep, and that's why we wanted to be very intentional about it. And so, hence, one of the great things about Tiny Thomas too is every week I send a revised version, if you will, of the gospel, the Sunday gospel, but written in kids speak, so that the kids can understand what the priest is talking about and what they're going to be speaking about during the sermon. And I've caught my own daughter a couple of times saying, "Daddy, I remember we talked about that last Thursday." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know. Remember when we talked about that? We read that story." And they're like, "Yeah, I get it." Because sometimes Scripture, especially the gospel, it's kind of difficult for a child to understand, and to be able to write it in their own native tongue as kids, it kind of just makes sense. And I've seen the greatest benefits from that portion alone, let alone the rest of the 2-week lesson plans.
Tell us a little bit more about the new course, Teach Like Jesus.
Sure. Well, Teach Like Jesus is primarily created for classroom teachers, but as we mentioned before, it's for everybody who has the vocation of teaching, especially homeschooling parents and regular parents, coaches, barbers, anybody who teaches anybody anything. That was the goal for the student clientele. And so the course itself is separated into 6 different modules. And we speak about everything from Jesus' teaching philosophy to his classroom management skills and to his pedagogy. And it also touches one of my more favorite portions is about his passion for students, the zeal that we all need to be able to love our students in the way that Jesus loves us. Because if we aren't really a witness in that love, then we really can't teach them anything. If they don't trust us, or they don't know where we came from, we know our own experiences, there's no way they'll be able to learn from us. And that's what Jesus did in his whole life. He produced these miracles. He taught lessons that were brought down to their level through parables. And he died on the cross for us as an ultimate testament of his very last lesson, to teach us how to love radically, to be able to love, to be able to put your own life down. And so many times teachers find themselves in this very dark place, because it's a very underappreciated job, a very underpaid job, and statistics say that the majority of teachers that begin teaching usually do not last more than 5 years. Within the first 5 years of their instruction, they find another job that pays better, that treats them better, that gives them more materials, that makes them feel more safe or helpful to society. And I think that's a shame, because I think since Jesus was a teacher, you would think that more people would want to be teaching, because it's Jesus' profession, and if you want to follow Jesus, then maybe you should take on his profession too. And it's a sad thing to see people throwing away their own vocations because they can't survive as a teacher and what they're being called to do. And so this course was developed for people who, feel that darkness sometimes too, to be able to encourage them and, show them the means as to how Jesus got through his dark times, so that we could ultimately be resurrected in our own teaching style, so that every time we're greeted with some sort of problem or some sort of issue, then we find the means through Jesus to be able to overcome it. And so that's the course in a nutshell. We charge $30 for the course. It's a very cheap course in expenses wise. But the best thing about it too is that 100% of the proceeds, 100% of the earnings actually go to the organization through which my wife and I were missionaries for a year after we were first married, out in Mi Casa for Children and Elderly in San Antonio, Texas. It helps the poorest of the poor in Mexico, both those who are in the asilos, or like the older guy, so like the older people who are in nursing homes, all the way down to children who are in orphanages. And so it's just a way for us to be able to give back to the organization that taught us so much about how to really teach, because when we were down there, we witnessed poverty firsthand and lived through it. And it was through that suffering that we understood what real teaching meant and what real sacrifice meant. And so it's kind of this course is a homage to them, and it's kind of a coming full circle cycle after my own first 10 years of teaching, starting there and then ending up where I'm at right now. Its goal is to be able to touch the lives of everybody, and because of them growing as teachers, the financial donation that they give to this course will be able to go help the corporal needs of the poor and needy in Mexico.
Oh, that's wonderful, and this certainly this book is something that we should be promoting too. 99 Ways to Teach Like the Master, because you can get a lot just out of this book, right?
Correct. Yeah. That in fact the course itself, its textbook is 99 Ways to Teach Like the Master, and the way that you read it is different when you read it alone as opposed to when you're reading it in a course. When you read it alone, most people are more motivated to read. When you're in a course, it's more like, oh, I got to finish this for my course. But the difference between it is that in the course, you get to read with me, and you have the benefit of my own experiences. And the final of the course is basically, a short essay that tells me about you as a teacher, because I don't want the course to end after the 6th module. I want you to be able to count on me to be able to help you through those difficult times when teaching is difficult, to be able to explain to you perhaps better methods that will help you make your life more efficient and more spiritual as a teacher, because that's the reason I wrote the book. I wanted teachers to feel and know that God loves them, and to be able to produce the same effects that Jesus had when he taught in their own classrooms. And the best way that I know how to do that is through community. And so through this course, we create a little community, whether it be a small group of students that are learning together, or whether it be one-on-one through email conversation that we might have. I'm here, and that's the reason I wrote the book, so that you know that I'm here, to be able to help you through those times when you need them. And the community is there as well through the Dominican Institute.
Now, in the school that you're at in Grand Rapids, there, what's been the reaction in bringing this 99 Ways to Teach Like the Master to some of your teacher friends?
Well, it's kind of a very delicate line that I can't really pass very often, because it is the public sector. And so for me to be able to say, hey guys, come read my book, it's about Jesus, I have to choose the right people to be able to speak to. But I have my colleagues that are the ones that help me. Yeah, there's certain colleagues with whom I'm able to speak more closely about those types of things. But no, I've had more of an effect on people who I actually don't know. And actually my sister teaches in the Catholic sector as well too. So there's a lot of times where I can work with her, or maybe you'll find me at a speaking event at a Catholic, a Catholic educational conference, or maybe I'll just be talking about it on the radio with you. So it's all about trying to figure out, who is in need of this book most, and what can I do to get the book in their hands, and offer them my own services.
Do you have any examples of, without using names or anything, examples of someone that has really taken this and really run with it?
Taking the book itself and running with it?
No, I mean a teacher, that's picked up this teaching, 99 Ways to Teach Like the Master.
Well, like I said, it hasn't been gotten into a whole lot of hands, but yeah, there's a handful of people. But I've actually received most of the success stories, if you will, from catechists, because catechists don't necessarily have training in education. They're usually volunteers that are, they were educated in some other form of work, and teaching doesn't necessarily come natural to them. And so what I found is that catechists really, really benefit from this book because it teaches them how to teach. It teaches them the correct way of declaring the gospel through the means of instruction, through the various materials and wavelengths in which that's possible. And so I've gotten my best feedback from that. And so there was actually one catechist who read the book and said that, before reading this book, I never realized the things that I was doing wrong as a catechist because, I was always taught, because she was of the older generation, that education was listen to what I say and this is how it works. And so for her to be able to, and she's been a catechist for so long, that's the only way she knows how to teach, was how she learned, was back in the 70s and 80s when, education was a lot different. Now, and even back when Jesus was around, there's a whole different pedagogy. There's a whole different means of which people are able to understand, what you're trying to say. And my book covers those ways in the way Jesus did, and brings them to into the contemporary world. And so, like I said, I've had my most success stories come from catechists for that very reason.
Beautiful. Now, talk a little bit about homeschooling and your experiences.
Well, I first and foremost, I have to say that there's no better way to educate a child than through homeschooling.
That's where it started,
that being
right?
said,
that's where it started before you had schools or anything.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, historically, even in the Catholic Church, majority of the time, the man would go out to work, the woman would stay home, and what would she do? She would teach the kids. And that would mostly be how it works. If you were fairly well off financially, you could be able to afford a tutor, but what would the tutor do? The tutor would come to your house and teach the children, which is ultimately what? Homeschooling. You wouldn't necessarily go anywhere. It wasn't until, the 18th, 19th century when schooling, if you will, became kind of a new thing, and it was for the economic elite again, and cathedral schools would open up, and you'd be able to send them there, and they'd be able to learn. But as public education became a thing, and as more people became able to, learn through, the public school system or through a private school system, there became this big need for teaching, for numbers and things like that. So I guess that's kind of the history of it. But as I said before, I think there's no better way to educate a child than homeschooling. However, that being said, the way that society right now is built around education, you need to have a very, very clear vocation to homeschool, because you really have to go against the grain to do it, and it's very, very difficult to do. So much so that even myself and my wife, we're both full-time teachers. We couldn't continue on homeschooling, so our own daughter is now in the school system, and it was hard for us to give it up, but at the same time, we just knew we weren't called for it at that moment. But that being said, there's no better way to teach a child than through homeschooling. However, you have to be called to do it, and so it's something that needs to be discerned very, very closely, and definitely passed by a spiritual director, because it's definitely a decision you don't want to make alone, because if you don't talk about your spouse, or if you don't talk to a spiritual director about it, it could go, south very quickly, because the last thing you want to do is, compromise the education of your own children. But the best way to do it, like I said earlier, is through homeschooling, because you basically get to individualize their instruction. You know your kid better than anyone else, and you also love your kid more than anybody else, so you want the best for them. And so what do? Well, you create the lessons, or you contact and get the curriculum that you desire, to be able to put your child in the best place for success. And, that being said, if you look at the statistics, year in, year out, homeschool children outperform public and private school children, bar none, in all the testing and everything when it comes to academics. Why? Well, because they're more focused. They know how to study. They know, they understand the value of education. There isn't a social. There isn't this social grasp that popularity could have on them. Even if they're good kids, you're still going to have these pressures from students coming from this way and that. And so homeschool, minimizes those, doesn't completely destroy them, but it minimizes those distractions to be able to keep a student extra focused on what is the task at hand. And what are the results? Well, as I said before, in the statistics, homeschool students typically outperform everyone else. And so, like I said, in the ideal world, we have a lot of homeschooling communities, being able to work with one another, so that the parents can be able to make the decisions without necessarily having to sacrifice the quality or the quantity of the education for their kids.
I had an experience in, I think it was in Grand Rapids, either Grand Rapids or Kalamazoo, when Alan Keyes was, I think he was thinking of running for president. I don't think he never actually got nominated. But while I was there, I met a homeschool boy who was 16 or 17 years old, and he had just come back. He had finished his homeschooling. He'd just come back from Russia after a year there teaching English.
At 16 years old. Mm-hmm. Yep, that's just amazing. And that's when we think about what we want for our own kids. What do we want for them? We want them to be successful, and that's a perfect story of what that means. And it's just an amazing thing, homeschooling. I wish we could continue on. I hope we do in the future, but at the same time, we just know we're not called for it right now, and we understand the value of it so much, but we just need to be able to put ourselves in a position that's possible.
And I think he was planning to take a law course, I think online at that time, with one of those Christian law firms, Thomas More or one of those. And he knew where he was going, that's for sure.
And for me, I didn't know where I was going until I was 22. And that was just for me because, for me growing up, the only thing I ever worried about was basketball, to be honest with you. And so, I ended up getting a scholarship to play basketball at Aquinas College in Grand Rapids and ended up playing a little semi-pro ball in Spain. And, my mind was just overwhelmed with this portion of my life that academics took a secondary role until basketball was taken away from me due to some injuries, and I had to kind of lean back on these other talents that God had given me in the academic and social realm. And so here I am now. It's all a vocation. But I always wonder what it would be like if I would have been able to make some more mature decisions when I was younger. I probably would have saved myself a lot of heartache, but at the same time, following God's will is very strange.
You did grow up.
You never quite know.
You did grow up in Grand Rapids then?
I did not grow up in Grand Rapids. I grew up in Grand Haven, 40 minutes away.
But you went to school there at Aquinas, huh?
Yeah, I did. I went to Grand Haven High School, and prior to that, I went to St. Mary's, a small little Catholic school in Spring Lake, Michigan. But then, I graduated and went up to Aquinas College to play ball for a couple of years, and then I transferred after my knees gave out on me to Grand Valley State University, and that's where I finished my undergrad. But then I went back to Aquinas to finish up my master's.
Have you ever met Father James Chilanson?
No, I haven't.
Okay. When you were talking about the tiny Thomas, maybe I shared this with you before, but I think it was about a year ago I met a seminarian from Holy Apostles, and he told me that his parents would take him to Mass when he was 4 years old. And they would always have adoration after Mass. They would stop by the chapel and before the tabernacle. And he felt that that was one of the main reasons he was a seminarian today.
There is so much power in adoration.
At 4 years old.
Yep, it's an amazing thing, and I've one of the main things that once we decided to send our own daughter to school, one of the things that I wanted her to experience, and she's 6, was every day before we went to school, we live about maybe half a mile away from Adoration Chapel. So we stopped by there on her way to school, and we stay there for about 10 minutes, just pray a decade of the Rosary. And she's got the routine down. It's nice to see her just kind of being there. But there are times, especially with Michigan winters, that it takes us a little bit longer to wake up or to get things done at home or to get the car out of the driveway because they have to shovel. And every time she's like, "Hey, Daddy, are we ready? Can we go to church right now?" And I'm like, "Well, you really want to go to the Adoration Chapel?" She loves it.
Really?
It's so peaceful, and she's willing to wake up early at 6 years old to be able to get there before she even has to start school, which she actually has to get there a half hour early anyway, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to get to work. So she stays with one of her teachers and learns for an extra half hour of school before school. And so she actually wants to wake up earlier to be able to still go there. And at the same time, tack on a couple more minutes under her school day too. It's really quite. It's humbling that this little girl would like to do this, and yet here I am as an adult, sometimes not wanting to do it because maybe I'm lazy or maybe I'm just overworked or maybe I have too many other things on my plate. But that 10 minutes is the lifesaver. It's what builds our faith, and it's really what kind of brings my daughter and I quite close. It's very nice.
Exactly. Have you ever been to the Upper Peninsula?
I've only been to Mackinac Island once, and that was for my honeymoon. So that's about it. It's as close as I've gotten to the UP.
Well, those are my stomping grounds. That's where I lived at Houghton Hancock, and I had a radio station there. And I was the sports director too. And talking about habits, before the internet, we used to have all the scores. In other words, the next day, there wasn't any score that you couldn't get. Tuned in early in the morning, and there were all the scores, So there was a couple of kids, their dad was a coach, and they took a trip out to New Jersey. And the first night there, they woke up in the morning, they turned on the radio and said, "Where's the scores?" Well, there weren't any scores on that radio station. You know what I mean? In other words, it's developing that habit, not for sports, but for sports scores, but for Jesus.
It's interesting that you say that. I used to do the same thing before I went to school growing up. I used to watch ESPN all the time with. In fact, that was actually one of my career goals because of that habit. Was watching SportsCenter. I wanted to be an anchor on SportsCenter because they looked like they were having a blast and they got to talk about sports all the time. I'm like, well, that's what I want to do. But
I probably told you, but I broadcast Division I hockey for 35 years.
Oh, that's awesome.
At Michigan Tech.
Oh, that's a team to reckon with.
Yeah. So what else can we say? We got a few more minutes here.
Sure. Well, we could future courses at the Dominican Institute. We're planning on launching a Rosary course, talking about its history, its spirituality, using a couple of really nice texts that have come out recently from Father Calloway, and obviously going back to de Montfort as well. That's the one that's on the horizon. We're hoping to get a pro-life course, kind of like talking about life issues. I'm trying to convince Abby Johnson to teach that course right now. So big pro-life leader. Unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, it's actually very fortunate. She's pregnant with twins right now, so I think I'm going to wait a couple months before I can, tap her again and be able to say, hey.
Really?
But yeah, the more the merrier. We're always welcoming new professors as well. If they have some sort of expertise or something that they want to be able to teach. One of my favorite courses that is in the planning right now is going to be a 33-day Marian Consecration course taught by Keith Berube, who's the author of Mary the Beloved.
Yes.
And so that's going to be a fan. I'm really looking forward to that one because if you've ever done, if you've ever done Marian Consecration, there's always this. I don't know. For me, there's always been this kind of like it's very spiritual, but as a Dominican, I really enjoy the academic side of things, and so this is going to be a 33-day retreat, if you will, a consecration that's going to kind of base on that book itself, and Keith's going to be available too. So I'm really looking forward to that one. That's going to be a new way to consecrate yourself to Mary in a kind of more academic way. One that's going to challenge you both theologically and spiritually. So I'm really excited about that one too.
What's your website?
Well, my personal website,
TJ Burdick. Where did I see? .com, huh?
Yeah, that's my personal website, tjburdick.com. And then we have DominicanInstitute.com and TinyThomists.com. We'll be able to bring you to the part in Dominican Institute. And if you're looking to get into the Aquinas course, if you just go to meditationsforlent.com, that will bring you to the St. Thomas Aquinas Meditations for Lent course as well.
Meditations for Lent.com? Well, you made it
simple. That's the one.
Huh?
Yeah, very simple. The more simple we can make it, the better. It's Aquinas, so.
Let's see. There was something else I was going to ask you, but I had a beautiful time with talking about Mary the Beloved. Boy, that book is just dynamite.
It really is. Yeah, I'm looking forward to. I just put in my copy. I've gotten to read a couple of since I designed the books at En Route Books and Media, so I designed the book covers. So I get like a preview view of the books before they get published, and from what I saw, I'm very anxious to get a copy of the real book itself. So it's on its way though. But in the meantime, just plugging away and being able to design more book covers for En Route Books and Media. It's always a good time. Dr. Muffwood's good to work with.
I'm reading it right now, so I'm about halfway through.
Very good. Excellent.
But did you ever see the DVD by, you were mentioning, from Stockbridge, I had the name just a minute ago. He did a DVD on his testimony. You were talking about using him on some of the rosary stuff.
Father Calloway.
Yeah, Father Calloway. Did you ever see his testimony on DVD?
I haven't seen his testimony on DVD, but in his book, Champions of the Rosary, he goes into a fairly good amount of detail on his testimony. And I've seen him online a couple times, too, and seen a couple of his video testimonies, short and sweet, and a couple of his talks as well. I'm a big fan. He's definitely, his story is, it comes across like I'll call it his craziness, if you will, because he does have a degree of, unexpectedness. Like the way that he preaches is very unique, and I really love that. As a member of the Order of Preachers, I think he's phenomenal, and so the way that he writes is also very characteristic of how he talks. And I think I read like the first paragraph of Champions of the Rosary, and it talked a little bit about his conversion, and I was like, okay, I got to read this whole book now, because how is a guy like this going to write a book like this? So
I know. When I first saw that DVD, it just blew me away. I had to show that DVD to everybody I met. It was just so powerful.
Yeah, I agree. And if you ever get a chance to see him speak, he's a great speaker.
I've seen him speak too.
Oh yeah, he's phenomenal. Phenomenal.
Yep. Well, I guess we're pretty well at the end here, and it's certainly been a pleasure talking to you again, TJ.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure talking with you too.
I'm excited about all the things you're doing, and you're a pretty busy person right now, huh?
Very much so, but it's all about discipline. If you can find the time, 20 minutes here, 30 minutes there.
Yeah, that's true.
Basically, everything that I do right now is basically I do it on my lunch break, and maybe waking up 2 or 3 times a little bit earlier every morning. And if I can, get an hour a day in of writing or creating or reading or contemplating, that's enough for me. And that's kind of what it's been building up to for these last 3 or 4 years. So it's all
you
coming
got your
to
regular
a
job.
Yes, exactly. And then home itself is great too. My kids like to make sure that my phone's off when I'm with them, so they keep me regulated pretty well.
Well, that's why we're doing this program later, right? Because of you have a lot of things to do at home, so.
Exactly. Yep.
So we've been talking with T.J. Burdick from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and he's the founder of the Dominican Institute and also author of the book 99 Ways to Teach Like a Master, amongst other things. So I hope to talk to you again someday. I want to meet you in Grand Rapids one of these days also. My daughter lives, I have a daughter who lives there, and I got to get over there too. So.
Well, yeah, next time you come over, I'll take you out to Yesterdog.
Okay, good. So, folks, we'll be back same time, same station next week with our program. I thought you'd like to know this too. And in the meantime, may God bless each and every one of you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.